Hi, I'm Wayne,
And I'm Hazel.
and welcome. Here we are again at the episode 6 of the Just Covered podcast in our legal and general offices in Coleman Street. We're here to talk to advisors about their views in the intermediary space.
And today we are joined by Natalie and Charlotte, who are founders of Bates Wilcox. So welcome to you both. How are you both today?
Good, thank you. Yeah, all
Yeah,
good.
really good. Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Because when we caught up, we chatted about how you're specialists in new builds, and how you kind of focus on that. So what was it that made you go into that area?
That's a really interesting one. So we weren't actually supposed to be going into the new build space. We started the business and we had this plan whereby we were going to go around to business parks, offer mortgage and protection workshops. We were going to do a presentation to my running club to get people into us as clients. And that was the plan: deal with clients, referrals, self-generated leads. And then we got a call from a national developer, and basically the business changed overnight.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't what we intended at all. We thought we'd have a nice little life, nice and chill, just us, one administrator, and we'd worked weekdays. And then, the call came in and we went 7 days a week overnight, didn't we? So
Wow.
that was how we ended up in the new build world.
But it was one of those that we thought, having just started a business, being given that opportunity to support a national developer, we had to take it and we had to run with it. And it was kind of a case of, let's go for it. What could go wrong? We could always say, actually, we can't do this, or we can make a successful business from it. And that's exactly what we did.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it?
It is. And taking it back, how did you guys meet? How did you end up working together?
Well, we'd actually worked together for a previous company. So we were both advisors there, and we both had sort of a director role there. And then we just kind of both had slight change in personal circumstances, in that we needed a bit more flexibility. In the workplace, I've got a now 7-year-old that was just about to start school. And for me, it was really important that I could take her to school every day and I could pick her up from school every day. Recently I just went on a school trip with her, so I wanted to have that flexibility. And then it just got to a point as well where I think we both got to a point in our career that we couldn't really go anywhere else. And we thought, we've always had a desire to have our own business. And then one day, I think we were just out shopping and looked at each other and went, hang on a minute. And that's basically where it all stemmed from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were just shopping and went, well, did you want to do that? Yeah, I want to do that too. Should we? And that was that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting stuff. And when that initial euphoria actually sort of came down, were there any realities and challenges that you realised early on where you thought, how do we do this?
So many. I mean, I think the brilliant thing is we are such like-minded people. Our work ethic is very similar, but also we've got slightly different strengths and weaknesses, which we just use them and, we play off of each other. But of course, there was are we mad? I was actually going through a divorce at the time. So I was like, okay, I'm going through a divorce, potentially I'm going to have no income for 6 to 12 months, going self-employed. It was that whole moment of, are we stupid? But it was very much a case of, if we're going to do it, actually, there's never a right time to do it. And actually having those pressures of having to make it work basically made us make it work, didn't it?
Well, exactly that. Yeah. It was a case of, there will never be a good time. So we just have to, if we're going to do it, let's just get on with it. We were going to hold off, weren't we?
Yeah.
We were going to hold off a bit longer, and we were like, no, we'll wait until after Christmas. And then we were like, why are we doing this? We've made the decision. Let's just get on with it.
I think once you know that there's something in your heart that you want to go after, it's taking that momentum and running with it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And making it work. How long ago was that? No.
That was June 2019.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we incorporated the business June 19. FCA license came through in the July. So yeah, and that's when we sort of submitted our first deal, wasn't it, in the July 2019? So yeah, 4 years
a
on
leap
nearly.
of faith, and here we are, 4 years on.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit more about that journey as we go into the pandemic coming along, all that type of thing. How did that affect you? What were you thinking at the time? What decisions did you make?
Yeah. I mean, that was tough because we had only just set up the business 9 months before we got hit with a global pandemic. So I must admit, there were days of, what have we done?
Yeah.
We've got no income. We're going to lose everything. I remember being on the phone to Natalie when there was the announcement about what sort of government help there was going to be for self-employed, realising that we weren't entitled to a penny. And it was a real horrible moment. I remember phoning my dad and saying, "Oh, I'm going to have to rent my house out. I'm going to have to come and live with you." And yeah, it was scary, wasn't it? But as always, Nat calmed me down and said, "It's okay, we've got this."
Charlotte went into blind panic mode. Yeah. And I was just like, we will make it work. We have to.
Yeah.
You know, and that's pretty much, to be honest, the attitude that we took. It was like, well, we're not going to get help elsewhere, so let's just get on with it. And luckily, we are surrounded by some really good people, and some, like, the national developers and everything phoned us up, made sure we were all right. You know, we're very lucky with our connections, I think. And that kind of helped, didn't it? Because then we were like, okay, fine, we've got this.
Yeah.
And we had our best month.
We did. We had our best month ever. So I think it was in the April, wasn't it? So just after we'd gone into into lockdown, I think because it was that whole sink or swim, and we were just like, we're not losing everything over this. We have to make this work. And yeah, we had our best ever month. So we were like, we've got this. Come on.
We only furloughed. No, we didn't furlough.
Just one admin, wasn't it? Just and that was, you know, again, because it was just
she
difficult.
had children, so it worked for her.
Yeah.
But the rest of the staff had to stay on because we were busy. You know, obviously there was a lot of panicking going on from clients, so you know, you had to be there at the end of the phone, calm, and be the voice of reason, rather than, you know, the clients kind of panicking and us panicking. You know, so it was tough, but it made us, really, didn't it?
Absolutely.
We came out the other side. So
I was about to say, I'm sure that was something we'd actually had that conversation with each other, and we said, if we can get through this, we can get through anything.
Fair.
It sounds like the strength of relationships you've got in two key areas were really important. So you had the developers that you built up, and then you had your customers, and that reassuring element that you were just talking about. And it's just, from what I'm hearing as well, you're very much that real sort of steel, solid double act, if you like. Just interested, how do you balance things? Do certain tasks go to Natalie, certain tasks to Charlotte, or do you mix and match? How does that work?
Yeah, we've both got our own strengths, haven't we? I'm your stats person. I'm kind of the business side of the figures, you know, and that kind of thing. And then you're Charlotte, you're kind of HR and
compliance.
Yes, definitely.
Bit of marketing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's, you know, and ultimately we are both still full-time advisors. So our core job on a day-to-day basis is advising, and then all the business stuff kind of comes behind the scenes. But yeah, we've got, as I said, we've got our strengths, we've got our weaknesses, and we've also got areas that, you know, like Nat loves doing the statistics, and it's not my forte. It used to be my forte, and our roles have actually changed completely. So you know, Nat does that side of it, and yeah, then we just kind of meet in the middle and just ask each other for advice as well, don't we?
Yeah, and we think the same. So half the time the conversation, whatever's Charlotte's, we were one-to-ones yesterday, didn't we? We were chatting away. She was like, "I've got an idea," and I was like, "Yep, I know exactly what you're thinking. Go for it." So luckily we know exactly what the other one's thinking.
Not many partnerships can say that. You're so in tune.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
Quite freakily at times.
That's good though, isn't it? And it keeps you, as you said, it kept you grounded and kept you moving on through. I mentioned, you said at the very start that it was really important for you to have flexibility. And that's why you wanted to become self-employed and you know, own your own journey. And we do hear from a lot of advisors, you know, trying to balance managing a career, managing a business, and managing a home life. How have you kept that?
It's hard.
Okay.
We're still working on it every day. But I think, you know, a few of the sort of core things that when we set the business up, we very much stuck to. So, i.e. the kind of school pickups and drop-offs for me is really important. So we actually don't start work until 9:30, which is quite unusual. But working in the new build space, a lot of the sites don't open till 10. So actually for us, if we can take that extra bit of time back in the morning, I can, you know, drop my daughter at school. I can, you know, go for a workout, then sit down ready to start the day at 9:30. You know, Nat's got 2 horses. She's at the yard every morning sorting them out. So it just gives us that time in the morning. And then again in the afternoon, once I've picked Evie up, if I then need to log back on and work in the evening, I will do that. And for me, working, you know, until sort of quite late at night, that's fine, because it means that the hours that my daughter's at home, I get that time with her. And that for me was the most important thing really about going on my self-employed journey.
Yeah, and I've got horses, so I ride before work and muck out and do all of that fun stuff, which suits me down to the ground, walk my dog, peloton. So yeah, if I can fit all of that in before 9:30, and then I'm on and I'm in it then. Whereas before, if you start early, you miss getting everything done. I can get the shopping done and everything before we start work. So, and then the phones go off at 5, and then we finish at 5:30. But that then just gives you half an hour just to do that final catch up and be able to log off and go back and do the horses.
I know. I've come from a horse family, so I get it. It's it takes up your life a lot of the time, doesn't it?
Definitely.
So it's perfect though. You've managed to get that balance for you and your team, and find a market within that new build area that actually works, not only from a business point of view, but actually from a lifestyle point of view for your business as well. How did you actually, so obviously you got that developer calling you up, wanting to work with you. How does the journey then go? So if the new build clients come in, what's the stages that they go through when they come to speak to you?
So we run through the qualification. Most of the time they phone in. So we're open 7 days a week. They will give us a call in. They will get put through to one of the advisors. We'll find out which developer they're looking at when they're going into site. We have to run through a financial qualification. Obviously, there's no advice given or anything at this stage. It's purely a conversation just to get a general outline of what they're looking to do. Just running through basic incomes, outgoings, that kind of thing. And then looking at what they qualify up to. We can then send that over to the developer, let them know kind of the price range so they can show them everything available to them. And then we find out when they're going to site, follow up with them afterwards, just to then run back through the figures, get all the financial kind of pay slips and bank statements and everything in. And then it's a case of running back through the illustration and everything else once they've decided which plot they're going for, going through medical side of things, the protection side of things, getting the mortgage offer issued, because you have to submit within 48 hours with a developer. So from reservation, and then obviously 28-day exchange deadline. So it's about 4 calls that we have, mainly the main calls with the clients, but we've also got 5 admin.
Yeah.
So we're very admin heavy to make sure that the journey's nice and smooth, and the advisor part is just purely talking to the client, whereas the admin side of it, we kind of hand over to the amazing team that we've got in the background. So.
And that's really good, that pre-qualification, isn't it, for yourselves and the new build? Because I remember way back when I was an estate agent and when I was advising myself, it's amazing how many clients will come in thinking that they can afford far more than potentially they can. So I guess that must cut out quite a lot of time wastage for both yourselves and that kind of home builder at the end of the day as well, doesn't it?
It's actually amazing as well that a lot of people do not know about stamp duty or the costs of moving. And you start running through the costs with them and they, all of a sudden it's, well, I hadn't allocated for that. And, this is why you speak to us. This is why the developer asks us to call you to run through this. We get a lot of people in the area where a lot of our developments are. They're looking to keep their existing property, do a let to buy and then do the onward purchase. So, of course, additional rate stamp duty. We get a lot of foreign nationals. Again, there's obviously the foreign national stamp duty where they've not been resident in the UK for 180 days. A lot of people don't know that. I don't think there's massive awareness about that in the market. So you start running through the costs and all of a sudden they're like, no, we're not going to keep our property now. We're going to sell it. And then we're going to go on and buy. So I just think actually what we do on that initial qualification call for the client, it's a great service because what we're telling them is, okay, based on your situation, yes, it is possible for you to be able to move. This is the approximate affordability, obviously subject to full documentation review, but also we're saying to them, and this is what it's going to cost you to move. Porting as well. We do so much porting, and that's another thing that clients are not aware of. They don't know that there's a huge penalty to get out of their mortgage. They don't know that there's a way around that. And especially the market that we're in at the moment, with the fact that interest rates have gone up so much, we're able to say to a client, we've got 3 years left on your rate at 1.54. I can keep that for you. And all you've got to do is take the top up on a borrowing available in today's market. And they absolutely love that because they don't know themselves. We do this day in and day out and have done for years. Clients don't move that often and they don't have the knowledge that we have. And usually you end that call and that client is so happy because they're then so well informed about the next steps and what their options are.
So it's almost, you've got a lot of belief that it's not, you're not apologising. It's not salesy. You're not apologising. You're actually benefiting that person from that call. And I think a lot of people have a bit of a mistake in our industry, think I'm not a sales, I don't want to be salesy, I don't want to do this, actually forgetting that our clients don't have a clue. They need us to give them
You're
that
not being
guidance.
salesy, are you? You're giving a
Yeah.
service. They need that. They don't know. You're going through it with them. You're giving all that information. You're enlightening them about what the process is going to be. And then at that point, I'm really interested. When do you introduce the concept of protecting that asset, the dream home they're buying,
Yep.
all that type of thing?
So we go through what's called a basic sort of telefact find. So it is kind of a shortened version of a full fact find. We would then go on to complete with the client. And part of that, you would ask them, what's your future plans about retirement? So you can potentially determine the term of the mortgage. You also then at that stage ask them their monthly budget. Now, when they say, oh, we're quite happy, we understand, about £2,000 a month is what we're happy with. At that stage, we then say, okay, great. So that £2,000, does that need to include the protection of your mortgage, or have you got a separate budget for that? Most of the time, the response is, what does that mean? What's the protection? With a lot of clients, especially first-time buyers. So you then break it down and say, well, of course, the reason I'm able to get you this mortgage is because of the income that you're on. You've got a joint income with your partner. Should anything happen to either of you, how is that mortgage going to be paid? And also, if for any reason you cannot work, how are you going to have an income to maintain your mortgage payments, but also your lifestyle? And therefore, that's what the protection of the mortgage is me ensuring that I don't just get you the home today, I can keep you in that home forever, regardless what life events are thrown at you. So we plant the seed at that initial call, and we factor it in almost right at the start as part of the budget. Once we then have finished that qualification with that client, we send them a follow-up email to document everything we've gone through in the call, and we send over a list of what documentation would be required. So at that stage, we then ask for kind of our full fact find documentation to be able to confirm their mortgage affordability, but we also then ask them for a medical form so that we can confirm what protection is available to them. And then we can start to build into the budget, well, what's that going to cost? Because if they have got health problems in the background, you can't then just go on to, a sourcing engine for protection and quote them the basic terms, because that's unrealistic. It could end up doubling based on their medical. So we get that all up front. So, just like fully underwriting a mortgage, we fully underwrite the protection right at the outset to give the client a really detailed sort of budget on what they could expect to make sure we're not leaving them unprotected.
That's great. And just with regards to the journey you've been on, I've mentioned it a few times, and I know we've spoken about it. Sort of, let's take you back to when you were 9 months in, the pandemic came along. It was the stark realization of having to do everything on the telephone. What went through your mind at that point, and how did you react?
Yeah, I suppose for me, this was probably a bigger shift than for Nat. And that was just purely because Nat had always been involved in the new build space, whereas I had, back then sort of a 12-year history, existing clients. So my client demographic was very different to Nat's. So Nat already did a lot of over the phone, whereas for me, everything that I used to do was going and sitting in my clients' houses. That's what I did. I did everything face to face. And I was a paper person. I loved printing off my affordability calculators, KFIs, and going and sitting and presenting them to the client. So for me, it was a massive change. Whereas Nat, I think, just carried on as normal.
I banned you from paper. That's what happened. I saved the planet single-handedly. I banned Charlotte from paper. So in the pandemic, obviously, I had to really change my mindset. Now, the one beauty that we had was when we set up the business, obviously, we didn't have a budget for huge, swanky offices that we all went to every day and, sat and had coffee in morning meetings. We'd set the business up to be a remote business, and we used to actually go to each other's houses in the very early days. So when actually we went into the pandemic, everything was already remote. Our phone systems were all VoIP. We all worked from laptops. Everything, it almost didn't change overnight in terms of our day. All that changed, I suppose, for me was the fact that I wasn't going out and seeing clients. We weren't doing new homes launches and sitting in, sales offices, which is what we did pre-pandemic. And for me, it was, I always had this perception, and I'm very much now, much an advocate to say it's all in the mindset of an advisor. So for me, the thought of trying to sell, a life kick IP plan, which could be at quite a high premium over the phone, it was a barrier that was in my own head. Now, you can
build enough rapport and trust with a client to basically give them the biggest debt of their life to go and make the biggest purchase of their life. So if you can do that over the phone, why can't you ensure that you're protecting that biggest debt and the biggest asset of their life over the phone? And as soon as I kind of adjusted to that, it just became the norm.
It's interesting because we see a lot of that, like mindset is like the key thing, and the advisors who create success are the ones who just absolutely believe, like, I'm waking up today, I can do this on the mortgage and protection or the wealth and protection. But we do still get advisors who say if it's over the phone, I struggle, or they say that they struggle to get clients to bring in those documents. So I'm really conscious you mentioned you've got that medical form up front, which I think is amazing. It gives you a really clear idea to be able to give really clear advice to your client. But how do you actually tee that up and get them to bring it in? Is that part of the mindset, or is there something else that sits behind that?
It is just part of the standard documentation. If you're doing the mortgage, the medical form comes with it. We don't action anything until all the documentation is in. Okay. It's like you wouldn't submit a mortgage without having a payslip. So for us, it's exactly the same for the medical form.
You're steadfast on that. That's your process. That's that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And as well, I think, if you get it at that stage up front with the mortgage documentation, they then, for them, it's just the norm. That's what you're teaching the client, is everything we're doing is the normal process. At the end of the day, as an advisor, you're guiding the client, you're telling the client what they need to do. And by having that medical form up front, it's not then an afterthought. You're not saying, oh, it's fine, just send me your mortgage documents now, you can send me your protection information later on. Because then straight away, you've told that client, by guiding them down that path, that actually the protection is not as important as the mortgage, because we can leave that until later. So by getting it as part of the standard documentation, you're saying this is just important as the mortgage, if not more important, because without the income, without having the finances, you can't have a mortgage, and you may have to sell the property, get rid of it.
It's a subliminal thing, isn't it? In not asking for that information up front, you're not placing the importance on it, are you?
Exactly.
But that tangible element that you've got as part of your process puts it out there, and it's resonating.
And we have a administrator who is purely protection based. So her job is medical forms come in before we speak to the client to go through the mortgage and protection. She does all of the research and tells us the best provider, any ratings and all of that. So we actually have invested quite heavily in making sure that all our clients are protected.
So you're almost making it as easy as possible for your client and yourselves. So there's no barriers there from both sides, is there? No.
And that's the thing. I think there's always been, as well, a bit of I call it an excuse. And I must say, there's been times throughout my career that I've used it as an excuse. So hence the reason I can say it. But there's always been this whole, I haven't got time. So what we did by bringing a protection admin in was actually taking that excuse away from our advisors by saying, all you need to do is get the medical form from the client, you send it over to the protection team. They will do the research. You have the call with the client, work out, what you're going to be sort of, advising them on, whether it be life, kick, IP, family income benefit. That then goes back over to the admin team for them to kind of, come back to you and say, this is going to be the provider for this, and this is the reason why. Obviously, the quotation's then put together. And again, you're then just having a call to run through and make the recommendation to the client. So all of the actual kind of legwork, which there is so much involved in terms of researching all the medical conditions, because most people now don't just have one disclosure. There's, 3, maybe 4 things on that medical form, which one of them alone would be fine, but a combination of 3 or 4 things could make it really difficult to place. And that is time consuming, going through pre-underwriting with insurers. So by having that dedication, and the knowledge of that administrator, she had actually done a protection sales role and then just decided that the sales side wasn't for her. So we were like, brilliant, you're exactly what we need. So she does an absolutely amazing job. And it just means that we can then talk to the client about everything that, the policies that are relevant to them. And rather than having to submit an application, go back and say, you've just been loaded by 60%, they're already aware of that before the application even goes in.
Yeah, it just shows that you've got the right people in the right roles doing the right thing for the customer. And you mentioned earlier on as well around, and it probably links to culture. You're talking about your opening hours and how it fits, and we talked about the work-life balance and all of that. I'm interested in what's been the positive effect, if you like, on staff morale, culture, business as a whole in implementing that.
I think our staff, well, they're brilliant, aren't they? And they love the fact that they can kind of, the phones turn off, so you can't get calls after hours. So they can kind of leave work and the next day come back in kind of fresh. And sometimes they jump on early and things. But we also have a lot of fun times out. You know, we do a lot of quarterly kind of meals. We go racing. You know, we've got a really good bonded team that all work really well together. Everybody helps each other. It's a team. And I think the hours that we work, because we don't allow people to work late. You know, if I'm online in the evening, that's my choice. And if I see another person online, they are told to get off. So we're open 7 days a week. There's no reason for anybody to need to work late because we're open 7 days. You know, you can get calls in, you know, if it's not convenient during the week, well, that's fine because you've got Saturday and Sunday. You'll always find people are free at some point. You don't need to be speaking to them at 8 o'clock at night. So I think the team are well balanced, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's no kind of divide between the advisors and the admin. You know, everybody is a team. And in terms of kind of what we do, we have what we call like a protection pool and a mortgage pool. So once we've actually got, say, applications that we need to submit, it doesn't go over to, you know, for example, my PA doesn't always submit my applications. It goes into, we've kind of got our protection app and we've got AppSat. And it doesn't matter which advisor it is, it gets sent over to that pool, and then the admin decide between themselves, again, depending on their strengths. If it's a buy-to-let application, for example, someone might say, oh, that's fine, I'm much better at using that system, I'll take that one. It could be a shared ownership application that comes in. That's fine, I do loads of shared ownership, I'll take it. So again, the admin team are very much like us in that they play to each other's strengths and actually help each other and say, I'll take that one, you do that one. So it just works really well, which also means that not one particular person is getting completely bogged down when you've got someone else that's sat there, you know, twiddling their thumbs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm hearing a lot about like agility here and like being able to just be really self-aware, but also be very agile, as you said. Like certain cases are best with certain people, so why fight that? Like, just let's all be agile and work together. The other thing I find really interesting that I'm hearing a lot is discipline, because again, a lot of the times that I've been an advisor myself, and it's so tempting to think there's business there, I just want to quickly do that, I just want to get that done, or, you know, the client saying, why do I need medical? Right, well, okay, I just want to get the mortgage done, you know. And it's, how have you found that, and how have you actually managed your own kind of temptation to think, right, that business is there to be had quickly? How do you keep yourselves and your team pulled back from wanting to, you know, really go for it all the time? Because what you're doing is completely right in terms of your process, but we do see a lot of advisors saying, oh, well, if I ask the client too much of this, or if I don't phone them back at 8 o'clock at night, I might lose them. How do you keep calm with that?
Again, I think it's the belief. And actually, you know, you are really valuable as an advisor. And I think some advisors just don't value themselves. And again, I used to be really bad for it. I used to say, yeah, that's fine, I'll come and see you at 7:30 at night, because by that time you've got your children in bed. Actually, that means I then miss bedtime with my daughter. So, you know, for me, it's, you know, we provide such a valuable service that don't do yourself, you know, almost the injustice of it, and say to them, these are the times that I'm available. What fits in with you? I can do it, like Nat said, 7 days a week. So, you know, the hours that I can arrange an appointment are between the hours of 9:30 and 5 o'clock. It can be any day of the week. So what suits you? And for me, it's, most people nowadays, if they really want to, you know, speak to you, they really want to go on that journey, then they'll put themselves out. I mean, let's face it, they'll take an hour out of work to go and view the property, won't they? So what does it take? Half an hour for us to go through all of their mortgage and protection needs on that initial call. So I think it's belief that, you know, and having that, not being concerned that clients will walk away because you're not committing to speaking to them at 7 o'clock at night. And I used to very much be of that mindset, whereas now, this is my diary, this is the times that I'm available. And actually that shows your clients that you're obviously good at what you do, because you've got a busy diary. So you're telling them these particular time slots that you are able to fit them in.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I came from an estate agency background, so I was the same as you to start with. I'd be, right, whatever day, whatever time, I'll be there, you tell me. But definitely your process works. And I love that you say that, you know, as an industry, we work hard for these qualifications. You know, it's not overnight to get to where you've got to, as mortgage advisors, and protection knowledge. It's years of experience and building it up. So absolutely, it's valuable to somebody, isn't it? Having that knowledge sat behind them, and they're purchasing, as you said, the biggest debt of their life, which is scary.
Totally
Scary
agree.
to
I
think
think
of.
sometimes, as you've demonstrated, you've got to do it to prove it to yourself, haven't you?
Yeah.
To install that belief, and the benefit you've got from that is helping to install that in the advisors and the admin staff that you've got there, and all those qualifications, as Hazel said, you've gone through to better show customers, and also show the fact that you're a professional person, like you said. You're not just available tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock every time. You're actually sought after. It's a scarce resource. It's something that people want in order to be able to buy that property that they so dearly want.
And I think the pandemic's helped with that as well, because before, I think because there was always this perception previously of, my mortgage advisor would come and sit in my house with me. COVID's actually helped that, because people now, you'll almost buy anything online or over the phone. It's just people are not scared to now do transactions remotely, and we can do phone, we can do Zoom, we can do Teams, whatever it may be. There's so many different ways we can connect with clients now. And I think therefore, it's made it more accessible for people. And with all the working from home as well, whereas people used to struggle to have those conversations about their finances during the working day because they might be in an office. Well, of course, you can't then start talking about your salary and your debts and things like that. Whereas actually now, so many people are working from home, and they'll say, do you know what, I can do it Thursday on my lunch break because I'm actually working at home. So I can still be in front of my laptop and I can have that open conversation with you. So it's actually made our jobs a lot easier, and we speak to more clients than ever between those sort of
And they've
core
got stuff at
working
their
hours.
fingertips, haven't they? Because they're more likely to be on the laptop, and a lot of more things are digital now because of the pandemic, because it had to be. So they can provide that information for you, can't they?
Absolutely. And the other thing I think really with the pandemic is just helped us in, again, sort of speed things up, is because everything has gone completely remote, we can take photos of passports, driving license. We've got electronic ID verification systems that we use. So no longer do I have to come home, with passports tucked in my laptop bag, absolutely panicking about getting them back to a client. Gone are those days, and I'm really grateful for that.
I remember that in the banking branch, photocopying. I have to photocopy for everything, applications, this, that, and the other. So yeah, I'm glad to see those days are
It
gone
was
for
always
you.
when someone was paid weekly and they worked offshore, and you had about 50 pay slips to scan in manually one by one each time. I don't miss that.
No, CIS contractors. Yes.
Yeah, being based up in Scotland, I had a lot of offshore paid weekly, random pay, all these different bits. I'm really interested as well, because when we spoke before we started filming, you said that you present the mortgage and protection at the same time. So can you tell us a bit more about that process?
Yeah, I mean, well, we've been trialing lots of processes, and we continue to grow it really. But after the initial call that Charlotte went through, and how we kind of set it all up, then it's a case of running through your mortgage illustration and the protection need at that point as well, because you've had the initial qualification. You already kind of see where the shortfalls are, and the client then also knows where the shortfalls are. So we go through the mortgage illustration. At that point, we also go through the protection. We also work out kind of income protection wise. So I think income protection is probably the most unsold policy, and probably the most important policy that any client should have. But we work out a budget, what are their new payments going to be? What are their bills going to roughly be? How much do they actually need? Because sometimes you don't need to cover the entire income, and it's trying to keep everything within a budget they're happy with, especially at the moment. With the cost of living crisis, everybody's very, very conscious about what they're spending. So we kind of run through all of that during the mortgage illustration, protection illustration. So it's all done in that combination, and also the buildings insurance at the same time, because it's all needs to be wrapped up into that one monthly payment, and also something they feel they've got enough cover, but without it being equivalent of another mortgage, really. So we do all of that on the second call, as part of the basic process, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's...
And it's asking questions, and as I said, I've always been a huge believer in protection. I took out an income protection policy when I was 19, which I've still got because I cannot touch it. It's a policy with a 4-week deferred period. It's RPI, I think, to the age of 65. And it's just, the advice that I got given back then, I'm so grateful for that, because it's such a good policy that, as I said, I can't get anywhere near. I've tried for years to try and rebroke it and I can't. So for me, it's about asking questions, but also it's about telling stories. I think with protection, you have to paint a picture, because just saying to someone, oh, you need life insurance, critical illness cover, and income protection, these are the reasons why you need it. Oh, but this is what it's going to cost you. They look at it and you will then get the kickback of, well, we want to get used to what the new running costs are for the property first before we make a commitment to that sort of payment. Actually, it's so important. And, for most people, we've got their bank statements. You're spending £30 a week at Costa. What's more important? And it's bringing it back to life. And I think for me, I've had friends who've personally claimed on critical illness. I've had clients, I've got a claim going through at the moment. And for me, it's telling those stories. I was recently talking to a client, and, one of the parents at our school has been going through cancer treatment. Now, when you then start talking about those real life stories, actually it brings it to life. And people then say, you're right, that happened to my neighbour, that happened to my brother's friend. And then all of a sudden you say, well, actually put yourself in their shoes. What would you do in that situation? Most people can't answer that, because actually it's not really a thought that's gone through their head, because you don't want to sit at home and think, oh, if I got critically ill tomorrow, what would I do? So you have to actually have that conversation with the client. And, I'm quite honest with clients, and I say to them, I've got to have a bit of a not very nice conversation with you, but it's my job to make sure that you are aware of the risks of having a mortgage. And it is a risk having a mortgage, because it's a huge financial commitment. And when you then actually start telling those stories, clients think, you're right. Do you know what? I might have said before, we can't afford it. Actually, we can afford it. Or, can we come to some form of agreement? And we're firm believers that everyone should have something. They might not be able to afford, what everybody should have. Everybody should have life, kick, family income benefit, income protection. It's not realistic that everybody can afford that and the level of cover that they need. So it's finding something that would give them the cover that they need should that happen. The staff often quite laugh at me, don't they, in the office when I'm doing a protection call, because, for some people you can have those slightly fluffier conversations, and for others you have to be really firm. And I remember one of the admin being horrified because I'd said on a call to a client, okay, Tom, you're dead. Hayley, what do you do? And my admin team was so shocked that I'd been that blunt with a client, but I felt so strongly about it because they were a couple with a family with 3 children, and they were saying they didn't even need basic life, which was less than £30 a month. And fine, not every client's going to take it, but my job is to make sure that they are aware. I've had that conversation with you. I've given you the option to be able to protect yourselves. If you don't then want it, that's absolutely fine. But I don't want to have to take a call from you in the future saying, why didn't you advise me on protecting my mortgage or protecting my family, protecting my home? And I've had those calls from clients. I've had those calls saying, I've just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I've got 6 weeks to live. What do I do? It's absolutely fine. Don't worry. I've got the details of your critical illness policy here. I'm going to help you through the claims process. That's great. I've also had the call from a daughter of a chap who her father died. My dad's just died. I understand you did his mortgage. Can you tell me where I'd find his life insurance? Didn't have life insurance. And the whole reason why is because, again, he didn't believe in it. And I tried, and I went back and I saw him back in the days of face-to-face many times. And in the end, I actually got a disclaimer signed from him, because I said, look, yes, the mortgage is solely in your name, but actually you do have older children. Would you not like to leave the property to them mortgage-free should anything happen? And his answer was no. Now, having to have that conversation with his daughter after he'd just died was awful. However, I had everything documented. So I was able to say, I can send you the email trail, I can send you the disclaimer. But actually, having gone through it with her, she said, no, it's absolutely fine. I just needed to know. So for me, those conversations, although they're never going to be easy, it was easier the fact that I knew that I had given them the opportunity. I had tried to protect them.
That's really important, isn't it? Do you not find working in this industry, and I'm going to sound really awful here, but my friend broke his foot on Monday and he's self-employed. And the first thing I said is, do you have cover? And then I was like, are you okay? Like, do you have cover? And are you, I hope you're not in too much pain. But it's the first thing that the minute you've worked in mortgage, wealth protection, I find you do see people in your life going through horrendous things. And it's not always the first question I ask. Obviously, if it's something a bit more serious, I'll chat to them a bit first. But it is the first thing that comes into my head is, oh my gosh, I hope they've got cover. Or like, what can I do? And don't you just wish it was that was just inbuilt in us all as a society to have that?
It's going back to mindset.
Yeah.
That's your mindset. And actually, I had exactly the same thing. I had, someone who I used to work with came to me and just said, my manager, who I also knew, has just had a stroke. He's in his 30s and he's just had a stroke. And again, it sounds really, really awful. The first thing I said was, has he got critical illness cover? Because that is our mindset as an advisor, rather than, it sounds awful, but rather than the whole medical point of going, oh, is he okay? Like, how's he going to be? It is, we just think straight away, practicalities, finances, how are they going to cope? And that is what we go back to saying about the mindset and being a believer in it and believing in the products and believing the reasons why you should have it. And I think also once you've had those claims and you've seen your clients and how much you've helped them by protecting them, you'll never not speak to a client about protection again.
It's belief in your profession as well, isn't it? Like you say, well, you said earlier, you signpost it with the customer first. I'm going to talk to you about something now that might be, not particularly positive, and you're going to talk about the protection side of it on the back of the mortgage and stuff. And then you've got the enthusiasm on the back of it as well, haven't you? You can just tell it's coming through from both of you. And then you're questioning them. Like you're asking about what could happen. And in that conversation on the back of the enthusiasm, they're maybe talking about, oh yeah, this happened to someone, or I had a friend or a family member or whatever. And then on the back of it, then you're providing that solutions. It's like 4 key areas that you're doing each time, every time. You've got the processes in place from, Natalie was saying, around the back office people. It just seems to be a perfect storm of positivity and doing the things right. On the back of that journey you've been through, and these horrible sort of 3.5 years of the pandemic that we've had. Fantastic stuff. Absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely. And I found that really interesting, hearing how you've done that and how you've just got this process that works and you're continuously always looking at it and making sure it's right. But what one bit of advice would each of you give an advisor listening who wants to get better at protection or start to grow their business?
I think value yourself is one of the things that we would definitely, put forward, because I think a lot of advisors do undervalue themselves and their knowledge. I think, and unless you believe in it yourself, you're not going to be able to help other people with it anyway. But also, you don't need to have loads of knowledge on every single product out there. A lot of people think that they need to know every critical illness policy there is and all the definitions, and you don't. At the end of the day, all you're doing really is put forward a need, and the client will tell you what the need is if you ask the right questions. So I think it's just a case of find something that works for you. If you've had a claim, then you'll find that works for you every time anyway, because you know the need. But if you don't believe in yourself, then you're not going to do it. But the mindset, it is just mindset. So if you just have to believe it yourself and believe in your ability. And I do think a lot of advisors don't have that. And I think, to be honest, unless you believe in yourself, nobody else is going to believe you. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think for me, it's, any advice that I could give to, any advisor out there is, how would you handle one of those calls like I took? And are you confident that you gave the client the opportunity to protect themselves, family, and their home? Because if you didn't, you need to question what you're doing, in my opinion.
And get good admin.
Yeah, good
Yes.
admin. That
Surround
definitely, I've
yourself with
learned
the
that.
right people. Definitely surround yourself with the right team, because that makes all the difference.
They're huge, sound hugely valuable. The
They
way
are.
that you've utilised the process and what they do is amazing. But thank you so much for sharing all of that insight and knowledge. I've genuinely found that
Yeah, it's been
really
absolutely
brilliant.
fantastic. And I know I've said thank
Yeah.
you so many times in advance of this, but really sincerely thank you. Great stuff. Absolutely amazing process, passion. enthusiasm, just anyone wanting to come into the industry or moving through and thinking, what am I going to do going forward? I think we've got it all here sitting in front of us and as part of the people that work as part of your organisation. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. No, it's been lovely. We've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely.